Holy City Center Radio. It is episode 170, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, September 11th, 2023. Hope everyone had a good weekend. Hope you stayed cool and stayed out of the rain when we did have a little bit of that on and off. And hope your week is getting off to a good start. Yes, today is September 11th. And of course, that means we remember what took place back in 2001 on this day. Just a tragic and unforgettable moment in our country's history, and something that's hard to forget even so many years later for those of us, who were old enough to remember that time frame. I can't believe it's been 22 years since that day. Seems like a lifetime ago, but also, not that far away, although 22 years is a lot of time. So definitely will be on my mind today, as I'm sure all of yours as well. Before we dive into the news, just quick updates here. Not much going on in Holy City Centerland as far as anything exciting to report to you all anyway. Had a very quiet weekend after my trip last week. Didn't really get to do too much besides work since I've been back. Nothing wrong with that, though. Happy to get caught up with everything. Although, one little thing I will share, my niece and nephew now have texting capabilities, as they were gifted watches. I think they were Apple Watches, that allow them to text certain people, family members and such. And so I've been getting, not a lot, but a good amount of messages. And I'm been enjoying that, seeing them text, especially my niece. She's always got something fun to share with me. And it's been nice getting texts and calls from the kids, every day or so. So that's been my big, exciting, and fun thing. It is football season. I hope your team won, unless your team was playing mine. As I'm recording this, the Giants, my team, are playing tonight. So, who knows what happened in that game. Hopefully it was a victory. But as you're listening to this, you may know. But yeah, glad to have both college and the NFL back. College, of course, came back a week or so ago. But this was the first week of the NFL season, so I'm excited for the return of football. Some good games were on, and if you don't like football, well, I'm sorry. That season is now well underway. And without any further ado, let's get into the latest news. The first story was a big one that came out after I recorded the most recent episode, so this has already kind of made its way through the news cycle. But if you somehow missed it, Lindsey Graham almost got in some trouble in that case down in Georgia. But for the time being, at least, and, in all honesty, it probably won't go anywhere. He won't be any trouble there. But if you missed the reports, the Georgia special grand jury that investigated former President Donald Trump's alleged attempts to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election recommended charges against Senator Lindsey Graham, although the Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis declined to include him in her criminal case. The grand jury's full report was released on September 8th, and it listed Graham among multiple names investigated in the probe, but Willis did not charge Graham, who, of course, we all know is a staunch Trump ally. So she didn't announce charges when she announced all those indictments against Trump and his 18 co-defendants on racketeering charges last month. For whatever reason, he was left out of the picture. Now, in Georgia, district attorneys hold the actual ultimate authority on who can be charged in any given case. Willis could still charge Graham, but she's really not given any indication anyway in any time she's held press conferences and such. So it is still possible, but I would be a little surprised if, it comes up. It just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. If it was, it would have already, but who knows? So why was Graham ensnared in this whole thing anyway? He drew prosecutors' attention after vocally contesting Trump's 2020 election loss, and then made a what some think is a controversial phone call to Georgia's election chief. So that's why he was, brought into this. He called down there, and in his mind was just doing his due diligence and trying to just ask, hey, have you guys seen anything down there that seems shady when it came to the election, and any fraudulent voting? Is there anything we should know? whereas others felt it was a little bit more nefarious than that. So Graham was in the upstate when the details of this information came out, and the press appropriately asked him about it. And, no surprise, he defended himself. He said, "To suggest I'm part of some grand scheme to overturn the election makes no sense given my actions." End quote. He made those comments at a lunchtime appearance at a Rotary Club in Westminster, which is a small town in the northwestern corner of the state. He also said, "It speaks to where we're at. It's me today. It could be someone else tomorrow." Well, Senator Graham, yes, it was you today because you were involved in this, phone call and actions that were going on in Georgia. And yeah, it could be somebody else. If that somebody else did the same thing you did, this isn't random. You were looked at because there were questions regarding your conduct. I never understood that whole, with all these charges against Trump and his co-defendants and people associated with them. It's always, oh, if they can do it to me, they can do it to you. And yeah, that's the point. People break laws or are suspected of it. Yeah, you could be charged. You could go to jail. You could face fines. You could be arrested. Who knows? Yes, it would be someone else if they did the same things you did. They didn't just randomly pick Lindsey Graham because they don't like him. They, you know what I mean? They're not just like, who can we recommend charges for, even though they weren't involved in this at all. He was involved. At this moment, they've determined he shouldn't be charged. That could change. It's ridiculous to make those kind of comments, but what else what else would you expect? So Graham, who obviously is probably frustrated by these questions, continues to say things like that, and that he was, he's on a fact-finding mission about the election, and he was doing so as chairman of the the Senate Judiciary Committee. So he's basically like, I was doing my job and I didn't cross that line. However, as I mentioned, many detractors say his actions to contest Trump's loss went a little bit further than it should have. But again, at this time, no charges, and we'll see if that ever changes. All right, the rest of this podcast is going to have a very clear theme, and that involves the group known as Moms for Liberty, who many, including myself, don't actually think they are for liberty. They are for what they want for themselves and their kids, and they don't care about anybody else's. So they are a group that came up, around 2020 when we were obviously going through the pandemic and schools were requiring masks, and or certain jobs were not allowed to be open, etc. And they sprung up saying, basically they felt mask mandates, or if there was any vaccine mandates anywhere, they were unlawful, they shouldn't be done. And then that's kind of what they sprung out of. But they've grown into this very powerful group now when it comes to their influence over politics, and a lot of candidates they back for different roles do get elected, and they've become very powerful, for the conservatives in this country. They want their support, and they are all around the country now. It's not just some small little group. So, they started with the school stuff, masks, then it morphed into this book banning thing, anti-LGBTQ, anti-accurate history, that kind of movement, under the guise of parental rights, which again just means those parents, but not other parents that disagree with them. Those parents don't have the parental rights that they want for themselves. None of this is new. What is new, though, is it appears they are making some moves in Charleston. They've already gotten some folks on the school board, but now it seems they're taking aim at the city council. And really, their tentacles are now weaving in and out of all levels of local government. And a few stories popped up that just kind of shows that that's their angle here is to get candidates on as many levels as they can so that they will do their bidding. And again, that means things like book banning, censorship, certain topics not being allowed to be taught in schools. Things like that, the stuff we've seen in the news over the last couple of years. So first, let's talk about the city council situation. There are 3 candidates for the Charleston City Council that appear to be backed by the local chapter of that right-wing political group, Moms for Liberty. This is according to the Charleston City paper. They were the folks who posted about this. I encourage you to check the link in the show notes for more details. As I mentioned, this isn't the first time they've backed people, but to my knowledge, this is the first time they've gotten involved in the city council race. They previously have supported several winning candidates on the Charleston County School Board in 2022, but again, now they're taking aim at city council. Those 3 candidates are District 3's Jim McBride, District 5's Ron Call, and District 9's Mike Gadsden. They all have received contributions worth a total of $5,000 from a pair of donors who also gave to the school board candidates back last year by Moms for Liberty. Now, this is according to an analysis of campaign disclosure reports from the South Carolina Ethics Commission. 2 of those 3 candidates are running for seats with no incumbent. So if no one runs against them, they are going to get the seat by default. So hopefully some candidates will, pop up. Maybe some are just waiting to announce. But at this time, 2 of those 3 candidates are going to face no resistance and will be on the city council. So it's no longer just these Moms for Liberty backed candidates who are, going to be in schools. That was bad enough with everything that they have been, doing, again, with book banning and censorship, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But now they want city council. So pay attention, register to vote, get ready for November's election. I mean, it's a big year, no matter, in 2024, of course, with the presidential election. But these down ballot races, that people don't necessarily come out for, pay much attention to, these are going to be super important. So check that voter registration. Check when, you are eligible to vote, where your voting location is. Make sure everything is up to date because they have got their sights set on the city council. Now, speaking of those school board members, they have caused a little bit of a kerfuffle. By the time you hear this podcast, we may know what exactly happened. But 4 members of the Charleston County School Board are claiming a lack of transparency over what they call a secretive special called meeting. Board members Courtney Waters, Darlene Dunmeyer Robertson, Darren Lee Calhoun II, and Dr. Carol Temple have called a news conference for today, Monday, at noon. The news conference is scheduled 3 hours before this special called meeting that the group says was called by the Moms for Liberty faction of the board. Why did they call this meeting? All we know is that it is to discuss the contract of Charleston County School District Superintendent Dr. Eric Gallion. The group has already, if you may remember in the past, they've already caused headlines and, they had an issue with the hiring process and, so they just hired the superintendent and now they want to talk about his contract all of a sudden. And they're being very secretive about what exactly that means. So the board members who are worried about this, they claim that they have not been told the actual purpose of the meeting or why the superintendent's contract is being discussed at all. In their statement, they said, on the heels of record-breaking test scores among all students in CCSD, elected officials of the Board of Trustees are again being forced to make whiplash decisions about the future of our children. The release also went on to state that while Monday's meeting was originally intended to be what they called the first public celebration of student achievement, referencing those scores from the SC Ready test. The community learned late on Friday that Gallion's contract would also be up for discussion in a separate special called meeting. The group claims that the other board members coordinated to set this meeting without informing the other board members. Board Chair Pamela McKinney, who is one of those Moms for Liberty back candidates, declined to comment on the meeting when Live 5 News reached out to her. So again, we don't know what's going on, but the fact that they're being cagey about it and that it's involving the contract of the superintendent is concerning. If it was not a big deal, if it's just like, oh, we just want to talk about this one little portion of the contract, or we want to reward him, you know what I mean? If there was something they weren't afraid to be made public for whatever reason, they would just discuss it. But instead, they didn't let the other board members know exactly what's being discussed. So they have no idea going into this what's going to happen. And obviously, they're not letting the public know either. Both are egregious and are shameful. Again, if they weren't afraid or ashamed of what exactly they're going to do, they would just say what it is and they wouldn't have coordinated this in secret. So again, this type of stuff is what goes on with these Moms for Liberty backed candidates in many states and is happening here as well. Another reason why it's important to go back to that first point about the city council and how they are going for it. And it doesn't stop there. There's another story that is tied to them as well. You may have seen this in the Charleston City paper, but there is one Berkeley County parent, one parent, that is challenging 93 books on the county's school shelves on the allegations of obscenity. For now, the books are still available, and there doesn't appear to be any set schedule as far as reviewing these books or what exactly is going to ultimately happen. So several Berkeley County School District officials wouldn't return requests for comment when asked by the city paper for more information about these separate challenges that were made in May by this parent. The city paper also couldn't independently verify the identity of the parent. The information came to light when the American Civil Liberties Union of South Carolina released the results of a public records request they made that revealed these 93 books that have been targeted for censorship in BCSD classrooms and libraries. So that's when this came out. And again, it happened back in May that these requests were made, but there really is no comment coming from the school district other than that those books are still currently available. So what does this have to do with Moms for Liberty? Well, across the state, politically motivated censorship seems to be on the rise. It certainly is in the news a lot and is making headlines. Horry County schools banned 12 books this year, according to news reports. Meanwhile, the Greenville County Library considered banning 24 books and faced allegations related to LGBTQ plus censorship. Recently, State Superintendent of Education Ellen Weaver cut ties with the South Carolina Association of School Librarians, which you may remember from the last podcast, citing concerns that the group had created a, quote, hostile environment, end quote, in its opposition to removing books from school shelves. We talked on the last episode how that didn't really seem to be true, and that the group had requested to meet with Weaver, who did not follow through on that request and instead just cut ties with the group. So all of that tied together, should be no surprise that the challenge books in Berkeley County include several titles that right-wing activist groups like, you guessed it, Moms for Liberty have targeted in other parts of the state. Some of those books include The Kite Runner, which was targeted for censorship last year in Beaufort County schools, and Gabby, A Girl in Pieces, which was previously challenged in Horry County. So no surprise, this is all tied together. I told you, this group is powerful. Part of it is, they are very good at what they've been doing as far as organizing, getting people involved. And I think there's a lot of parents who just don't know any better about what this group really is. And they say, oh, these parents want to make sure my kids don't read pornography in schools. That's some of the claim. Oh, some of these books are basically pornography. And of course, what parent hearing that there's porn in libraries available to their children, if they're not looking any deeper than that, if they just hear that, of course, oh, yeah, okay. So I think there's a decent amount of people who support the group just based on something like that and don't really know the full scope of what's going on, and that a lot of their claims about these books aren't necessarily true. So it's showing how effective they can be in our schools, and it's happening, again, all over the country. And now they've got their sights, it seems, on other levels of local government. And so we all very much need to pay attention. We need to see who is backed by this group and then vote for the candidate that is not. Look, that's my opinion, obviously. I know a lot of people who listen to this show and follow Holy City Center have that same opinion. Some don't, and that's okay. Some will support Moms for Liberty, and that is obviously their prerogative. They can do whatever they want. But for me, this is very concerning, and I think for a lot of you it is as well. 2020 with COVID and everything, it made a lot of people politically active on both sides of the aisle. that previously weren't active. And in some ways, that's great, obviously. More people being involved in politics is a good thing. People should be paying attention to, what goes on. But of course, the opposite is true, too. It seems we've gotten a ton of extreme kind of candidates on all levels of government that were tied to like a pet project, like no more masks in schools, no vaccine mandates. But that was really all they were running for. And they don't really have any experience, some of them don't seem to really be interested in governing appropriately. They don't know the rules. That's going to happen with inexperienced candidates, of course, down the ballot. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. And people sometimes have to learn. But it just seems that they were motivated by these pet issues. And then once, COVID, I mean, it's not over, obviously, but once everybody, pretty much everywhere in this country has done away with masks and, the vaccine mandate talks have calmed down, they had to move on to the next project. And we saw that was demonizing LGBTQ people, going after drag performances, going after trans people, especially trans children, forcing the issue of trans health care, trying to ban it, certain parts of it, and essentially censoring more uncomfortable parts of history and the LGBTQ history in schools. And that's where this aim has now gone, now that they've moved on from that. So you see a lot of candidates who are now talking about this book banning. They won't call it that, of course. They'll say it's parental rights or what have you. But it's expanding, and this pet project is not going to go anywhere. They are going to continue to push these types of things. So we all need to, I know it's so tiring following politics and has been for many, many years now. And it never seems to stop. But it is something that we need to pay attention to. And just, again, it shows the importance of those, less sexy down ballot races. People don't necessarily get all excited to get out and vote for a school board. It's a very small percentage of people. I mean, we already have a hard time getting people to vote in presidential elections in as far as percentages of people who actually show up. So it just continues to show that importance, and we all need to keep that in mind. All right, hopefully I sufficiently scared you. I know it's not October yet, but Moms for Liberty, man, spooky season. I hope you have a great rest of your week. I'll talk to you all again on Wednesday. Thank you to Tyler Boone, whose music you hear in each and every episode. And thank you to Lindsey Collins, who is producing this show with LMC Sound System. If you want to support the podcast, rate, review, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. You can also pick up merchandise at holycitycenter.com/shop and support through Patreon at patreon.com/holycitycenter. Until Wednesday, good night and good luck.